So as always, please remember to subscribe so we can hit 600, because I have so many DC and Marvel videos coming out at the moment, and Superman and Lois is now officially on hiatus for the next 7 weeks, so starting next week we'll have Supergirl. I'm probably going to at least review the Supergirl pilot, or not the pilot obviously, but the first episode of season 6 of Supergirl, because it's the final season, and depending on how much I'm liking the episodes after that, I'll review them weekly. I'll see. Supergirl is very hit and miss in terms of its quality, so if it's a season I'm not really feeling, I'm probably not going to review it too much, but hopefully it's good so I can review it. But yeah, this was another very solid episode, just like episode 3 and kind of episode 4 as well, but to a lesser extent. This was a very, very, very character focused episode, and more about kind of the people of Smallville rather than the kind of the Superman stuff or the big stuff going on back. And there was a lot of Superman stuff, there was a lot of villain stuff going on, but I just felt in general at its core this was an episode that more so was meant to develop the characters and push their stories forward rather than focus on the villains and all of that. And a big part of this was the fact that a big part of the episode was devoted to flashbacks to Martha Kent and a young Clark Kent. Clark when he's first learning to fly, and Clark when he first leaves Smallville, probably to head to the Fortress of Solitude, I think, at that point, and then from the Fortress of Solitude he probably goes off to Metropolis, very similar to how Superman the movie portrayed that, where Clark first off goes to discover himself at the Fortress of Solitude, then becomes Superman and goes off to Metropolis. Because Martha gave Clark kind of the key to the fortress, so he's probably going to go find out what that's all for, learn about himself, and then go to Metropolis. Or he may just come home to Smallville first, because we know that his original costume came from Martha, so it's possible he goes to the Fortress, goes back to Smallville for a while, and then goes back to Metropolis. But yeah, I love those scenes so much. It was really cool seeing Clark do some pre-Superman vigilante stuff. It was cool. The Martha scenes were great. Both the scene where Clark goes off for the first time and the scene where they give Martha Kent the bench in present day really had me tearing up. Those were some great scenes, and some of the best we've had out of the show yet. Those were just so good, and I would love to see more kind of flashback related episodes like this. Maybe not to an Arrow extent where every episode had flashbacks in it, but I definitely think like a couple episodes a season where we delve into Clark's past would be really good, and just Smallville's past in general. I mean, seeing early Smallville years with Clark, Lana, Pete, that sort of stuff would be really good as well. It also was worth noting that Kyle and Lana go way back, because in those flashbacks, Martha was talking about how is Lana still going out with the Cushing boy, which would have been Kyle, so that's pretty crazy that they've been around that long together. This episode was very heavily focused on Morgan Edge without actually having Morgan Edge in it. We're learning that Derek Powell, who was the missing son of Sharon Powell, actually wasn't missing. He was likely being given powers by Morgan, and he got powers very similar to Leslie Lara, and Leslie Lara and him were an item. But this pretty much blows a hole in any theories I had about Leslie Lara being in any way related to her comic book character, because she's a Kryptonian in the comics, she comes from the bottled city of Kandor, and all that sort of stuff, and the fact that Derek had pretty much identical powers to Leslie pretty much tells us that X-Kryptonite isn't just giving people 1 or 2 powers, it's pretty much replicating the entirety of Kryptonian powers inside a human being, which means Leslie is pretty much 100% now in this timeline, or in this continuity, a human who has been given powers from X-Kryptonite. But that X-Kryptonite's going to be a huge problem for all the characters, definitely. And it seems that I don't know whether it's killing people or this is a Suicide Squad situation where Morgan has bombs inside of his people, and that if they screw up, he blows them up, which that would be pretty insane, but I wouldn't put it past him. He's an insane person. Luthor also played a pretty decent part in this episode, where he's now driving an RV and investigating Lois, because he knows that Lois is always tied to Clark, and we got the huge revelation that in his Earth, Luthor and Lois were married, which this isn't the first time this has happened. Earth 3, Luthor in the comics was married to Lois Lane. Earth 30, which was the Red Sun Earth, Lex in the comics was married to Lois as well. So this is something that's happened a couple times in DC continuity, and that kind of makes sense, because both Lex in both those in both the Earth 3 continuity and the Red Sun continuity weren't exactly villains, at least at the beginning. So it kind of makes sense that they'd be married in that timeline, because those are the DC Comics versions of the character who is probably the most like a hero, I want to say. I know in Earth 3 he was a hero, then he wasn't a hero, and Red Sun's debatable, but they're definitely taking bits and pieces from various versions of Luthor. Like, they're not using one set comic book version, we're gone way past that. This also kind of blows a hole in Injustice being related to the evil Superman. I know everyone, myself included, was thinking that, okay, so is this an Injustice version of Superman? I was actually going to make a theory video on if the Superman we saw at the end of episode 2 was Injustice Superman. So I'm really happy I didn't now, because this has kind of made it clear that this has nothing to do with Injustice, because Injustice's whole thing is that Clark breaks after Lois is killed, and Clark just goes insane after that. But if him and Lois aren't together on Luthor's Earth, then this would kind of, blow a hole in the one thing that makes Injustice Superman be Injustice Superman. Although maybe there's some other stuff where Lois was involved with both of them. I am starting to think now, is Captain Luthor the villain? Because I'm not sure anymore. I'm starting to think that maybe Luthor is going to see that Morgan Edge is the greater threat of the two, because Morgan Edge is making Kryptonians. Luthor might realize that the Clark on this Earth, or the Superman on this Earth, is not the Superman of his own Earth. So that could make him realize that, okay, I need to take on all these Kryptonians who very obviously are evil, and not Superman, who's a good person on this Earth. So I'm interested to see where that goes, because while originally I was thinking, okay, Morgan Edge is going to be the Lois's villain of the story, Luthor is going to be Superman's villain of the season. So they're both going to have their own villains. But now Superman is doing loads of Morgan Edge stuff, and now Luthor is involved with Lois stuff, so it's all crossing over, and I'm confused on who actually is the main villain, unless they're both the main villain or one of them's the main villain. Kyle had a really interesting arc this episode after one of his close friends, Mitch, I think his name was, on the fire team, was pretty badly injured, and so it was cool to see him kind of doing that. He was much closer to what I want to see out of his character, which is kind of sympathetic than the douche that he kind of was in the early episodes, so I want to see more of that. Jonathan is becoming more and more of he's getting more and more annoyed at everything, which is a realistic progression. Like, he just got dumped by his girlfriend, he's realizing Smallville is not where he wants to be, and he's having a very similar kind of progression to Clark in the flashbacks, where Clark wanted to leave Smallville and really start his life. But the show gave it a really good resolution rather than keeping this going on, where Clark was like, look, give it some time, you still feel the way we do, then we'll talk about it. And that was a really good way to handle the situation. I know I keep comparing the drama this show does to the other Arrowverse shows, and I shouldn't be, but in the other Arrowverse shows, if this happened, we'd have another 4 or 5 episodes of Jonathan being pouty before Clark and him would have that conversation. So the show is doing a really good job at moving this all along so fast. Chrissy is also a really good character. I was kind of worried about her at the beginning, just because it seemed like there was more going on behind the scenes with her, like she was possibly involved with Morgan Edge or something. But I'm just starting to think that she just is a reporter who hasn't had to deal with this kind of stuff before, and now she is dealing with it, and she can't get enough of it, because she's actually reporting on real stories and doing a real serious kind of mission. So I'm liking where her character is going. It's really cool kind of seeing that, like, she seems like a much younger Lois who's just starting out, which is kind of cool. And there was a scene at the beginning on the TV screen where we're seeing that Superman is now saving people across the world a lot more regularly than usual. We saw some shots of him in space. We saw a shot of him on pushing a boat or something. So those were some really cool shots. I like that. Jordan and Sarah were also a big part of this episode, which again, I think that they're doing a good job at making it not too drama filled. So I'm liking where that's going. And Clark and Lois, they're just the absolute best. That's all I can say. The chemistry between Bitsy and Tyler is perfect. The dialogue between the two is so cute. I love it so much. There were bits at the start where it's talking about the Harvest Festival. I loved how Lois is just constantly propping Clark up, like, he's not just Superman because of the powers. And when Clark's just geeking out over the chocolate bacon, and he just kind of looks and goes, so good. It's such it doesn't feel like acting. It just feels like they're actually the characters, and I love that so much. It's really amazing to be able to do that properly, and they just are handling it amazingly. Tag came back at the end of the episode. It's the tag to keep us wanting more of the episodes, and probably the tag to keep us tied over until the show comes back in May. But he was wearing a very kind of X-Men First Class kind of uniform. I kept trying to pause it to see what the logo on the shirt was, but I didn't really recognize it. It looks like some kind of eagle thing. So he broke out of his school or something, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm very surprised to see him back so soon. So I'm interested to see what goes on there. Obviously, he somehow learned that it was Jordan's heat vision that caused him to get his powers. So it'll be cool to see where they go with this. But yeah, another really solid episode. The show's on hiatus now. Supergirl's next week. But the first 5 episodes of the show were so good. I'm very, very, very happy with it. There's not a lot of things that could be doing better, in my opinion. But how do you feel about it so far? How do you feel about the overall 5 episodes so far? Are you liking it? Are you hating it? And please remember to like, share, subscribe, and all of that. And I hope you have a great day.